'Tistou of the Green Thumbs by Maurice Druon. Chapter 11, in which Tistou decides to help Dr. Ayling. Tistou made the acquaintance of the little sick girl when he visited the hospital. The Mirepoix Hospital, thanks to Mr. Father's generosity, was a very fine hospital, very large and very clean, and was provided with everything that could possibly be needed for curing every kind of illness. The sun shone in through the huge windows. The walls were white and bright. Tistou did not think the hospital at all ugly, and yet he felt... how can one express it? He felt that there was something sad about it. Dr. Ayling, who was in charge of the hospital, was a very learned, very kind man. You could see that at a glance. Tistou thought that he was rather like Mustache the gardener, but a mustache with large tortoise-shell spectacles instead of whiskers. Tistou told him so. The resemblance, said Dr. Ayling, is no doubt due to the fact that Mustache and I are both concerned with tending life. Mustache tends the lives of plants, and I tend the lives of human beings. But tending the lives of human beings was much more difficult. Tistou quickly began to realize this as he listened to Dr. Ayling. To be a doctor was to wage continuous war. On the one hand, there was disease, always ready to slip into people's bodies, and on the other, good health, always ready to slip out. And then there were thousands of kinds of disease and only one kind of good health. Disease wore all kinds of disguises in order not to be recognized. It had to be unmasked, discouraged, chased away, while good health had to be tempted to return, then held tight and prevented from running off. "Have you ever been ill, Tistou?" asked Dr. Ayling. "No, never." "Really?" But indeed the doctor remembered that he had never been called to see Tistou. Mrs. Mother often suffered from headaches. Mr. Father sometimes had indigestion. Carolus, the manservant, had had bronchitis last winter. Tistou, nothing. From the day he was born, the boy had been completely healthy. No measles, no chicken pox, not even a common cold. A very rare instance of continuous good health, a most exceptional one. Dr. Ayling showed Tistou the room in which little pink lozenges were made up for coughs, yellow ointment for spots, and white powder for fever. He showed him the room in which you can see through people's bodies like looking through a window, in order to discover where disease is lurking. And he showed him the room with mirrors in the ceiling, where appendicitis and so many other things that threaten people's lives are cured. Since this is a place where evil is prevented, everything ought to be gay and happy, Tistou thought. Where's this sadness I feel hidden? The doctor opened the door of the room in which the little sick girl was lying. "I'll leave you, Tistou. You can come and find me later in my office," said Dr. Ayling. Tistou went into the room. "How do you do?" he said to the little girl. He thought she was very pretty, but very pale. Her dark hair curled about the pillow. She was about Tistou's age. "How do you do?" she replied politely, but without moving her head. She was staring at the ceiling. Tistou sat down beside her bed, his white hat on his knee. "Dr. Ayling tells me that your legs won't walk. Are they better since you've been here?" "No," said the little girl, as politely as before, "but it doesn't matter." "Why not?" asked Tistou. "Because I've nowhere to go." "I've got a garden," said Tistou in order to say something. "You're lucky. If I had a garden, I might want to get well in order to walk in it." Tistou immediately looked at his thumbs. If that's all she needs to make her happy, he thought. "Are you terribly bored?" he asked. "Not terribly. I look at the ceiling and count the little cracks in it." Flowers would be better, thought Tistou, and silently he began to call, "Poppy, Poppy, Buttercup, Daisy, Jonquil." No doubt the seeds flew in through the window, unless of course Tistou had brought them in on the soles of his shoes. "At least you're not unhappy," he said. To know that you're unhappy, you've got to have been happy, said the little girl. I was born ill. Tistou realized that the sadness of the hospital lay in this room, inhabited the little girl's head. It made him feel sad, too. Do people come to see you? Oh, yes. In the morning, before breakfast, Nurse Thermometer comes. Then Dr. Ayling comes. He's very kind. He always talks very gently and gives me a caramel. At lunchtime, it's Nurse Pill's turn, and at tea time, Nurse Injections that hurt. And then comes a gentleman dressed in white who pretends that my legs are better. He ties strings to them to make them move. They all say that I'm going to get well, but I just look at the ceiling. It, at least, doesn't tell me lies. While she was talking, Tistou had got to his feet and was busying himself about the bed. There's no doubt, thought Tistou, that if this little girl's going to get well, she must have something to look forward to from day to day. Flowers, with the way they unfold and the surprises they spring on you, will most certainly be a help to her. A growing flower asks a fresh riddle every morning. One day it half opens a bud, the next it uncurls a leaf as green as a frog, then it unfolds a petal. In her eagerness for each day's surprise, perhaps the little girl will forget her illness. Tistou's thumbs continued to be busy. I think you're going to get well, he said. What? You think so too? Oh, yes, I'm sure of it. Goodbye. Goodbye, the little girl replied politely. You are lucky to have a garden. Dr. Ayling was awaiting Tistou seated behind his big chromium desk, which was covered with huge books. Well, Tistou, he asked, what have you learned today? What do you know about medicine? I've learned, said Tistou, that medicine can't do much where there's a sad heart. I've learned that in order to get well, one must want to live. Doctor, aren't there any pills for giving people hope? Dr. Ayling was astonished to discover so much wisdom in so small a boy. You found out for yourself, he said, the first thing a doctor must know. And the second, doctor? Is that to be a good doctor you must love your fellow men. He gave Tistou a handful of caramels and wrote a good report in his notebook. But Dr. Ayling was a good deal more astonished the next morning when he went into the little girl's room. She was smiling. It was as if she had waked up in a meadow. Narcissi were growing round her bedside table. The bedspread had become a coverlet of periwinkles. Wild oats waved across the carpet. And then the flower to which Tistou had given all his care, a wonderful rose, continually changing as it unfurled a leaf or a bud, had entwined itself about the headboard and climbed up to the pillow. The little girl was no longer gazing at the ceiling. She was looking at the rose. The rose leaned down on its long stalk to kiss her. It was the first time the little girl had ever been kissed. That very evening her legs began to move. She liked life now.